It was it a year ago or so? I can't remember when I saw this op. Was that a year ago in June? Reagan Dunn does this piece, Seattle Times, basically saying, hey, King County Housing Authority, you guys want all this money. Why don't you show us that it's working? Why don't you do some metrics? Why don't you see the data? If this thing is supported, you're asking for more money. Just show us that it works. You said you're going to be able to take it down from, like, I don't know, thousands homeless or something down to 30. We're going to get to zero. This is the big plan. That's going to give Reagan Dunn an opportunity to go, although he's a respectful individual joining us on the line now. You're not going to go, see, I told you so. But, I mean, this must make you feel like, hey, I told you this is going to happen. You guys are going to run out of money, and you're not going to have any of the data to prove that you're doing anything successful.
Yeah, and that's the tragedy for our community, right? We have one of the highest homeless populations per capita of any city in the United States. And there was an opportunity where there was broad-based public support maybe to get some programs going. But, you know, the homeless authorities fumbled the ball repeatedly, and now just kind of sort of the exclamation point on this continued erosion of its effectiveness, promising to take 1,000 people off the streets of Seattle, impacting maybe, if we're lucky, a fifth of that. Now they're closing their doors in that particular emphasis area, Partnership Zero. It's really sad. You know,
and also the sad thing, Reagan, is that there was private dollars went in there. Balmer was in there. I think some other private organizations or, you know, privately funded, normally capitalist-driven individuals kicked in cash into these programs, and it just seems like it gets squandered or unaccounted for. Well, what's the problem? Is it that you have you know, people that are in the nonprofit world leading with their heart, and then someone coming along and saying, show us that this is working, give us the hard statistics? Is it because of that marriage is always uncomfortable?
Yeah, you know, so what the King County Regional Homeless Authority was a new level of bureaucracy inserted between the homeless community and local government. And so it was supposed to coordinate all the actions inside, in and around King County. And it took the place of what King County was doing and what Seattle was doing independently. The problem with this authority is, one, their policy direction. They're just continued to double down on Seattle's failed homeless policies, which basically is to buy every homeless person a single occupancy apartment for them to live in, as opposed to congregate housing, not focus on the drug or alcohol addiction problem, which most of our homeless population suffers from, or to improve the mental health situation. And I think the public would be better served if we just went back to the government directly helping the city of Seattle or King County, the various agencies there that knows how to contract, that knows how to do audits, that knows how to make transparent statistics to show results. And this new agency is just floundering. And sadly, you know, the private sector invested in it, and it's failed. And, you know, it's a disincentive for them to invest again.
Yeah.
Reagan, you had this article. I think was this June of 2023 or was this 22 that you wrote this piece?
I think that piece was in the spring, this last spring. But I've been pounding the drum, and I finally decided to set a policy direction for me personally. So that's why it came out. But I've been hammering on it for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been following this. So one thing that I was really interested in, like just one thing that stood out to me, you kind of broke down how much money they were actually getting, how much they were spending, and also their proposal for future spending, which was insane. This is the number that jumped out at me. It said they wanted basically like $11 billion to fight homelessness. Is that right?
Yeah, it's closer to 12. They want $12 billion over 5 years, which if you break it down by statistics, the number of homeless people in King County, all of them, that is $880,000 per homeless individual in King County. That's how they want to spend the taxpayer money. That's more than all of the money that goes into King County government and all the money that goes in the city of Seattle combined.
And they wanted to do that essentially with like almost very little oversight, because this is separate, right? This is separate from elected officials. These people are appointed to this spot.
Yeah. So you've got a governing body that's appointed under what we call an interlocal agreement, it's a contract. And a lot of those are with lived experience, in other words, formerly homeless. And essentially what it is, you know, we're not going to focus on drug addiction. We're not going to focus on mental health. We're not going to focus on congregate shelters, which is a far better use of money. We're going to buy everybody an individual unit to live in. And, oh, by the way, there are no restrictions on people coming from out of state or out of the community as well. You want to come here, we'll give you all this money. And problem solved, which of course we know it won't be and hasn't been.
What's crazy about that, I mean, if you break that down per person, $882,704 per person, as you broke it down in your piece, which is, the number is so ridiculous to even say. But the proposal is to what? To put them into a tiny house or semi-permanent tiny house? I have a house, and I can tell you that you don't have to pay $882,000 for a tiny house. It just doesn't cost that much. So where's the rest of the money going?
Yeah, well, that part of it is the new layer of bureaucracy that's been created. You know, the Homeless Authority gives their employees unlimited leave. You can take as much leave and vacation as you want.
That was the other part.
Example.
I underlined that right here. How does a business survive like that?
No, it doesn't. What it is it's wishful thinking. Look, there's massive amounts of taxpayer dollars that are being wasted here. Taxpayer dollars that can be used to seriously address this issue. Putting in the infrastructure we need for drug and alcohol treatment, job training, mental health disorders, and a lot of other things that would go a lot farther than double downing on what's called a housing first policy. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you give somebody a house, every problem is solved. Well, that isn't true. 64% of our homeless population identifies as actively addicted to drugs and alcohol. I don't know anybody that can keep even subsidized housing for very long when they're actively addicted to something. 74% suffer from a serious mental health challenge. That is not addressed at all. It's wasted dollars, and what we're seeing is the lack of discipline from an untrained activist bureaucracy.
Right.
Is creating just waste. And we call it the leaky bucket theory, right? You pour a bucket full of water and it just drips all the way. By the time you get it to its destination, there's only 20% of the water left. All that money is being wasted, spread out, not spent on core services. And the underlying problem is that we're double downing on Seattle's failed homeless policies, which are making Seattle and King County a dead-end street for the nation's homeless problem.
Well, I'll tell you, I had seen a study and a piece that was in Reason.com. The problem for Washington and for others is that you've hooked your wagon to the federal dollars, which is housing first policy, which began in the Bush administration under compassion and conservatism. And by taking the federal dollars, you're restricted as to what you can do. Houston, on the other hand, decided they weren't going to go that way. So they take money and they're able to spend it where they want to spend it. And they've had tremendous success with reducing the homeless population because they're doing sort of different things to fit different people as opposed to a one-size-fits-all, which is, was always the case when it comes to the federal government. It's our way or the highway, right? So if you broke away from that and you really started to say, oh, we'll fund different organizations, we'll fund different, structures that work better. If you're getting a better result, you'll get more money rather than everybody all in to fail altogether.
That's right. You need to give. There's multiple pathways to solve this problem, right? And so, Houston's got a good example. There are other examples like San Diego who are doing the job better than we are. A one-size-fits-all approach, especially when you're funding policies that don't work. There's a lot of ways that we could be implementing our policy objectives a lot better. One of the great things isn't talked about, John, is the amount and the rate at which people are coming from out of the community to take advantage of
That's what I say. People respond to incentives, Reagan Dunn. If they know I can get a house or get this or I'm going to come. I'll come from. And no, people are not coming from out of state. I'm like, why wouldn't they come from out of state?
Yeah, of course they will. They'll take advantage of, first of all, if you can. If you've got a drug problem and you go to Seattle, you can get drugs very easily. They don't enforce the laws there. You get free housing. Everything's taken care of. Cities all across America have one-way bus programs for homeless, and they are sending them to Seattle. The greatest lie that has been perpetuated, and even in part by some of our mainstream media in Seattle, is that the problem isn't as bad as it is people coming in from out of state. There's no state law. There's no local laws that prohibit access to services and housing the minute you show up here. And so until we create the disincentive for people to come here, we're never going to solve the problem. No matter how well we do it here, if people can come here and take advantage of taxpayer hospitality and corporate hospitality, they will. We'll never solve the problem, and that's what we've got to start to change. What you're going to see in the next few years is exactly the same thing you've been seeing over the last couple of years with the Homeless Governance Authority. They won't make it better. They won't improve it. And so we have to make a dramatic tact in a different direction. And I think you're right. Getting away from this Homeless Governance Authority and into a better set of circumstances is what we need to do.
Let me ask you on a personal thing. How do you do this every day? I mean, you sound tired today. It's Thursday. But Reagan Dunn, you've been in there.
Oh, you sound awake. You sound great.
No. I know Reagan Dunn. He sounds a little tired.
All right.
But seriously, You're in there every single day. It's the same crap over and over and over again, right? You could do this interview in your sleep. What keeps Reagan? What keeps you going? Because it's the same back and forth on the council. I don't need to spend this or that, right? But like, don't you just want to just scream at some point?
Look, I was born and raised here, man. I was born and raised in the district I represent. My kids are the fourth generation of my family to live here. I know what this community can be.
Right.
And I wanted to achieve its goals. We spend way too much time governing not to our greatness. Let me put it that way. We're not governing to our greatness, to our potential. We're governing exactly in the other direction. And I want to change it, and it's worth the fight. And if I leave the council, there isn't, in my opinion, a voice there that's really going to be harping on reform and limited government and measurement of government programs and focusing on best practices that are proven to get results. And so I feel like I have an obligation. I'm going to keep fighting, until there's no more fight left in me. But for the moment, there's fight, and that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, it was Rob McKenna, and then you were in there. You're in there, and Kathy Lambert was in there. Kathy's out of there. You're like the lone dog in there, right? It's that scene from American Sniper, right? There's the sheep, and then the sheepdog, and somebody's got to fight for the little guy. So, well, hang in there.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Well, we're working hard, and I think we can turn this around, but we got to stop focusing on failed policies. And boy, the money, we can't be writing blank checks to activists who aren't going to be accountable to the voters. And that's the biggest problem with the Homeless Governance Authority.
There you are. Well said. All right, Reagan Dunn. Thank you. See you around town.
All
Reagan
right, man.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. All right. I see Reagan every once in a while. Over in Cle Elum, he's got fancy cowboy boots.
Very nice. He doesn't live in Cle Elum.
No.
No.
He's not lucky enough to live in Cle Elum. That's the problem. But if you're sitting there like every day having the same conversation about the same sort of stuff, it's like, God. But you do have a sense of like, I got to stay in there and fight for it, because if I don't, there won't be somebody else. As you produce Dory Monson's show, I used to talk to Dory all the time, the stress and the strain and the work that he used to put on him. But he had a real sense of like, I need to keep doing this, because if I don't do this, if I'm not the watchdog, if I'm not the guy, speaking for the little guy, who else would?
And there wouldn't have been.
There what? Yeah. No. Now people are like, well, Brandy Cruz, yeah. And they're like, you got to stay in there and keep going, because if you're not saying this stuff, if you're not putting this stuff out, then nobody gets it, and then everybody...
And, come on, John Curley. People say that about John Curley.
No.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Not the way Dory worked. Dory worked himself to death.
No, Dory was...
To death.
Dory had a calling. He was on a unique mission. Absolutely.
Yeah, that guy. So Dory used to work, in case you don't know. So he would finish the show, take a couple of hours off, hang out with Suzanne, and talk to the kids. Then he was back in it again. So after dinner, he'd watch a little football or something.
I would get emails from him. So I produced his show for like 8 years.
Right.
I would get emails from him at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I'd go to bed at that point. I'd be asleep.
Yeah.
I'd wake up the next morning, and I'd have 3 emails around 2:30, between 2:30 and 4 a.m.
So
and then he'd go to bed for a couple hours, and then he'd wake up and he'd hit the gym and come on in.
So Nicole Thompson, who was producing for him, would say, Dory, it's 9 o'clock. The show's to bed. We have all the interviews. I've got everything you need. Now go to bed. Get ready for bed. He would send another one, like you said, 10, 11. Then he'd get one like around 1. Her phone would ring. And then she would say, Dory, she'd write back, go to bed. We're finished. The show's set. It's all set. I've got everything I need. Go to bed. And, of course, he'd still be up until like 4 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'd take an Ambien. He'd panic at 5 o'clock and take an Ambien at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then he's like,
he told some stories about him trying to function throughout the day, having accidentally forgotten that he took an Ambien at 5 a.m. and realizing, I got to be out of the house. Yeah, it was funny.
So the same thing of like, so Reagan Dunn, not to the position that where Dory was, because Reagan still keeps this balance in his life, but like this idea, like you can't quit, because if you quit, who's going to say this stuff? Who's going to find this stuff?
Well, and you heard him there. His kids are fourth generation in his family to live in this area, and you don't want to just give it up. And you see that it's not working the way that it's currently working. The people that are currently running it, it's not working.
Yeah, but you got to get some wins a couple times along the way for you to feel like, well, okay, there we go. We get some momentum moving in the direction.